This PowerPoint is to cover information related to the ranch map portion of the Nebraska State Range Judging Contest. This is Station 8 at the Range Judging Contest. The first part of Station 8 is to determine stocking rate. And to complete the stocking rate portion of this station, you have to figure available AUMs, needed AUMs, the difference in AUMs, and then make a decision whether the stocking rate should be decreased, increased, or no change. If you are interested in learning more about stocking rate, I have another PowerPoint related to this that you can watch. This PowerPoint simply deals with part 2, answering the map questions. The goal of any grazing system is to evenly distribute grazing in the pastures. There are several practices that can be done to help improve grazing distribution. So for this portion of the contest, you are going to answer yes or no to these management decisions based upon the facts that are given. Make sure that you're making these decisions based only on the facts, on what the landowner wants and needs, not on what your opinion is. When in doubt, it's best to go with no or to go with the minimum. Typically, we don't like to make changes if we don't have to. The first question asks if the salt and mineral location should be changed. Livestock find salt to be very palatable, and because of this, it can be used to draw cattle to undesirable parts of a pasture. Contrary to popular belief, salt and mineral does not have to be located by a water source. Cattle can eat salt and go 8 hours before they need water, so they do not have to be located together. Many ranchers do locate them together, I think just for the ease of checking them at the same time, checking water, checking salt and mineral at the same time, but they do not have to be located together. And actually, to increase grazing distribution, it's best to not have them located together. So if on the map the salt and mineral is located close to a water source, you would check yes that you need to change the salt and mineral location. Similarly, if the salt and mineral is located in a poor condition area on the map, you would want to change it so that that area doesn't become even more worn down. Salt and mineral location, changing the salt and mineral location is the most economical method for improving grazing distribution. It's really easy and simple to do. Letter B asks about prescribed burning. Prescribed burning is a beneficial practice where there is excessive plant residues. Typically in our area, this is caused by eastern red cedar encroachment. Prescribed burning is not always the most practical practice. If you can mow an area, that tends to be more practical. Also for burning, you need to make sure that there's enough precipitation following the burn to help with regrowth. We oftentimes don't do prescribed burning on fragile sites such as choppy sands, just because it will tend to cause that area to erode even more. So if a map were to have extreme eastern red cedar encroachment and the landowner has done prescribed burning in the past, you may check yes that it's an okay practice. Letter C is limit livestock access to water. First of all, in order to limit access, you have to have access. So the map would have to show that there's streams, rivers, or lakes on the property. And then it may also show that the banks of the water is being damaged. So if it was a river, maybe along the river, it would have that the ground there was in poor condition, and that the landowner may want to maximize wildlife habitat. If that's the case, then you're going to recommend that yes, they fence off the water so that the banks of the water can regrow, or so that the landowner can have wildlife. Letter D is build a livestock dam or dugout. Again, you must have a stream or a sub-irrigated area on the map in order to build a dam or a dugout, and there must also be a need for additional water. Kind of the goal for water is to have one water source per section, so that's 640 acres. You also need to have a water source for every pasture that you have on the map. So if there's a pasture on the map that does not have water and there is a stream or a sub-irrigated area in that pasture, you would want to build a dam or dugout. Letter E is install or relocate a well or pipeline. If there is a dam or dugout, you would want to use that option first, but if there is no sub-irrigated areas or if there's no stream, the only other way to get water to an area would be to locate a well, relocate a well or a pipeline. So if an area of 640 acres or more is without water, or if a pasture is without water and you cannot build a dam or dugout, then you would check yes for this option. Control brush or weeds is letter F. On the map, it will show that there's a brush or a weed problem. Some things that might be shown are annuals, noxious weeds, poisonous plants, weedy shrubs. Some common things that might be on there are cedar trees, purple loosestrife, thistles, leafy spurge. If those plants are present on the map, we would want to make sure to control those. Make sure that you pay attention to the legend on the map because it will tell you what different things are represented on the map. Letter G is reseed depleted rangeland or farmland. Oftentimes we only do this if it's an abandoned farmland or an extremely poor conditioned area. Letter H is divide pasture or to cross fence. In order to divide a pasture, you must have a large pasture, and kind of the rule that we use is a half section or more, which is 320 acres. So if the map shows, let's say, one pasture that's 640 acres, you would want to divide that pasture to make to better distribute your grazing. Initiate rest rotation grazing is the next one. In order to rotate, you have to have more than one pasture, or you have to have divided the pastures in the question before. In order to rotate, you have to have two pastures available. The other thing that you have to make sure of is, does the landowner already rotate? In the scenario, if the landowner already rotates, then you can't initiate rotation. So you need to pay attention to the scenario as well as knowing how many pastures are available. If there is no rotation system in use and there are multiple pastures, you do always want to initiate rotational grazing. The next choice is initiating rest rotation. Rest rotation is a little different than rotation because rest rotation allows a pasture to have a rest period. So you would rotate, but one pasture would receive rest. And what that does is it allows the landowner to maximize wildlife habitat. So if in the scenario it says that the landowner wants to maximize wildlife habitat and there are multiple pastures to rotate, you would say yes to rest rotation. Kind of a rule of thumb is that you cannot answer yes to both rotational grazing and rest rotation. You cannot do both at the same time. It's one or the other or neither. Letter K is change season of grazing. Change season of grazing means that you would only graze during certain times of the year. For example, maybe a pasture you would not graze when the pheasants are hatching in the spring. This is useful. Again, the landowner has to have the want to maximize habitat for wildlife, so it should say that in the scenario. And if rest rotation is not an option. Rest rotation is the best scenario, but if that's not available, let's say that it's just a single pasture of 100 acres, then you would go ahead and change the season of grazing. And the last option for the ranch map for improving stocking, for improving grazing is non-use, and it would indicate in the scenario if there has been a wildfire, severe drought, hail, or grasshopper infestation. If it says that in the scenario, we may just not use that pasture or go with non-use for a year to let that pasture recover.